What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and we're set to hear from Aaron Glenn for the third time since he's become the newest head coach of the New York Jets at the NFL Owners Conference. And there's a couple burning questions that I have out there. I would love to have some additional context or maybe some definitive answers even as it relates to some of these questions, because there's definitely been a new set of ideas or rumors or any number of topics that have come up since he's been hired, right? Everything down from how he's building his coaching staff to front office changes to the free agency approach, extensions that we've already handed out as well as ones that are pending, and much more, right? Draft conversations, etc. So here's some of the top questions that I have for him that I think would be realistic questions for us to hear during his meeting or his press conference, I should say, right? So for kicking things off, is the quarterback competition truly going to be open, or are they working on the basis that Justin Fields is their definitive starter? He's praised or preached competition at every level since he stepped into the building, and I don't think that signing Justin Fields has necessarily negated any of that, but it is an odd situation as only the New York Jets tend to find themselves in, right? You can definitely look at the 2-year, $40 million contract Justin Fields received as more of a 1-year $20 to $30 million tryout season, right? Which is pretty expensive, a pretty penny for a player that many people wouldn't necessarily rank in their top 16, I would imagine, right? Or if he is, he's sitting comfortably in that like 14 to 16 range, but it'd be hard to think that he's just comfortably one of the best in the league. But it makes sense on the surface level. 25 years old, one of the elite quarterbacks any moment that he touches a blade of grass on the NFL field, and he still carries the upside of being able to improve as a thrower. So, you take all of that, you look at what Tanner Inkstrom has been able to accomplish helping out Ben Johnson with Detroit. You look at how we're set up to really create a dynamic offense in the mode of a team like the Lions or the Ravens. And it's not the worst dart throw, right? There really wasn't going to be many other valuable options out there, whether you were looking at the veteran class or you were looking at potentially signing some kind of young up-and-comer dart throw, right? Like a Cooper Rush, for example. And this draft class doesn't offer any definitive answers either. I think even for the growing love of someone like Cam Ward, again, it's been consistently put out there that people think he would have been the 6th, 7th best quarterback in the draft class from last year. So the best case scenario, we were better off just trading a first round pick and maybe a little bit more to try to get somebody like JJ McCarthy from the Vikings at the time, right? So with that said, though, is this an open competition? Is the money that they've given Justin Fields too much in terms of kind of that 1-year deal scenario that I talked about, to where they do just want to fully hand over the reins to him and look to Tyrod Taylor to be that backup veteran bridge quarterback type guy to Justin Fields this year, and or maybe a rookie, and just ride it out, right? Try to get that development intact from day one with Justin Fields, as opposed to having to sacrifice some first team reps and stuff like that in order to see if Tyrod Taylor is better than him. I'm still in the camp, arguably, that I would love to see a competition, right? Prove to me that, and again, I've been in the camp that Tyrod Taylor could get us to the playoffs if we perform anything close to what we've seen over the last 2 years from a defensive standpoint, and of course still having some of these same offensive pieces. But if you could beat Tyrod, I'm completely comfortable with what we gave Justin Fields. But I don't want to see a situation just like we've seen with Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold and many other quarterbacks before him, where we're just handing the keys over and we're saying that we feel like the plan is good enough, especially with this new regime, right? You haven't earned anything. Now that you're within your new roles, you have to go back out there and prove it once again. So until that's done, I would like to see some answers there in terms of how they expect that to play out. Question number 2. We've heard this mantra that this is a win now culture, right? The rebuild kind of designation is out the window from Eric Glenn's perspective, but you can definitely arguably look at our free agency approach and say we focused a lot on the third tier of building up our team, right? A lot of special teams guys, a lot of people that are going to be filling in for that backup spot, or looking to, fill in as part of a competition for third string, and maybe some guys can find their way into a second string role. But outside of a Justin Fields, outside of a Brandon Stevens, there isn't a clear signing where you can say these guys are fill-in starters. And in fact, I talked about this in a video before, where it feels like we have to nail multiple starters in this draft in order to walk away with this free agency approach working. Now, it'd be a little bit of a different story if you can say, okay, we attacked a bunch of second string level signings, and now maybe some of those guys can bump up into a starting role, or if not, there'll be quality backups and stuff like that. But I'm still good with the approach as a whole, right? I think building up the lowest tiers of the roster is a great way to make sure that you have an extremely comfortable floor, and you have guys that, when you talk about that next man up mantra, really ends up being something that can live up to his reputation. But again, maybe there's a little bit of a change of heart there, right? He's also talked about everybody being in lockstep. So maybe Darren Mucci set the course that, hey, we need to make sure that at the lowest level, these guys walking in understand, even as a third string guy, this is the level of effort, skill, expectations that we have, and it only increases in the difficulty as you look to move up in our roster, as opposed to let's go out and spend a ton of money. Now, this feeds into another question here as well, but this is something I'd be interested in. And also, there's a narrative, I would say, that's out there, right, where if you look at these free agency signings, this is a huge signal that Aaron Glenn has a ton of confidence in the staff that he's assembled and their ability to get these guys to outperform a lot of these expectations. And I don't know if it'll work this way or not. Every year I have to kind of read back up on how the compensatory picks stuff kind of works to the best of the knowledge that's out there. But this would also be, I imagine, a smart free agency approach, where if you can get a lot of these guys, or even half of these guys, to really outperform, and then they move on the following year as you look to get this draft class acclimated for the Jets, and you focus on the next one, you'll start to see returns on those guys, right? And all of a sudden, those guys are turning into additional 5th, 6th, 7th round picks that are coming back for a pretty cheap 1-year rental, where you were able to get more out of them than they've had in their career so far. So we'll see how that pans out. But this was a good leeway into the next one. Has this regime seen enough to pay Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson? I would argue you probably want to go ahead and knock out both of these guys, right? Because we've seen the wide receiver market approach $30+ million. And we finally just seen that same thing with the cornerback market for Derek Stingley. And arguably, you're looking at Sauce Gardner as the greatest player at his position under 25 or so, right? And even then, if you want to extend the range, right, you're talking about maybe somebody like Pat Surtain being the only person that I wouldn't even say objectively, but arguably is consistently better than him. Now, obviously, he's just had this down year, but I don't think anybody will look at that and say that this is a clear reason why we can't pay this guy, right? It was still a career year for 85% of any other cornerback in the league in a down year for him. And you also get that Aaron Glenn, Steve Wilks, Dre Bly kind of secondary bump for him, where you feel like they're going to add a little bit more to his game, a better understanding of being physical out there, which is a huge knock on Sauce Gardner's game, right? Going out there, getting his shoulder pads out there to tackle some people finally. But realistically, again, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, 2 cornerstones on each side of the ball playing premium positions. Do you want to wait and then suddenly you're paying these guys an extra $5 to $6 million more dollars, right? Every year, the contract that ends up being record-breaking, it spikes by a ridiculous amount, right? And it just makes a ton of sense looking at history and stuff for us as well. we rarely ever get guys that we draft, we develop, we've seen them consistently look like one of the best players at their position. These are the guys that you want to make examples for if you're Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji walking in. You say objectively, we love what you guys stand for. We feel like we can do even more to help you guys out in your career. But here is your reward for all of the work and realistically the suffering that they've dealt with up to this point before then. So we'll see if they have the stones. That's more of a Darren Muji question, and I haven't seen if he'll be speaking at this NFL owner meeting or not. But maybe Aaron Glenn will have some insight there. Next, from a schematic standpoint, I'm very curious about this. Is tight end or wide receiver the more valuable position within this new offense? Now, many people assume that we're just going to be a Detroit Lions 2.0 version of their offense, if you will, that's really owned by Tanner Engstrand. So maybe that means we're taking out a little bit more of the trickery from Ben Johnson, or maybe that was Tanner Engstrand. We don't know, but we could be set up to where realistically you're talking about more of a Ravens type scheme, right? The dual threat quarterback, the tight ends, if you consider Tyler Warren a reasonable pick and he's there at 7. And even then, many of us think that we could double dip at that position as well, even if we do grab a Tyler Warren, right? So you're talking about having the 12 personnel, the dual threat quarterback, the elite running backs in the backfield, right? Breece Hall, Braylon Allen. I still really, really love Isaiah Davis. So you have a complete running back room that has the skill set to cover all the bases that you're looking for, and you have most of your offensive line intact. So we definitely have the ingredients to make this recipe work for us if we wanted to do a hybrid of both, right? Ravens / Detroit Lions, and use heavy elements from both of those. It will make a ton of sense. But that could be a huge indicator as well of what we plan on doing in the draft. I think plenty of that definitely depends on how the board breaks for us. But it puts that much pressure on us to arguably select somebody like Tyler Warren if you do feel like we're going to implement what we're seeing from the Ravens, where maybe it's a skill set thing with Lamar, who's never really established a strong rapport, I would say, with a lot of his wide receivers. Marquise Hollywood Brown, I believe, off the top of my head, being the only 1,000-yard guy for him. Otherwise, that offense is always going through Mark Andrews, is always going through Isaiah Likely, since they picked him up. And it's always going through Lamar Jackson's feet and the other running backs that have been in that room. So maybe that's the way to best utilize some of the resources that we have out there, and knowing that Garrett Wilson is already that guy after playing with 1,000,001 quarterbacks definitely helps, makes that an easier decision. But just something that I'm really curious about. And then two of the last ones here, right? Let's talk about the offensive side of things. Do we plan on getting creative with doing any shifts? We've talked about AVT moving to the right, and maybe that allows us to hold off until day 2, day 3, where you have a lot more of the tackles in this class that, due to arm length or maybe a little bit less athleticism than you'd love to see from like a threshold perspective, get kicked inside to guard, and you feel really comfortable with them as guys that could play above where they were drafted at. Or do they stand pat, and then maybe you do look to pick up somebody like an Imbo if you trade back, or Mimbu, something along those lines, right? Not something I love, right? I think AVT has finally been able to settle back in once again. You can make the argument that you are better off allowing AVT and a combination of some kind of a blocking tight end to help out whoever the right tackle is, as opposed to having to hope somebody excels at guard, which is an easier position to hide. But it's also an easy position that if a guy just isn't up to snub, can cause chaos. And I look at the Houston Texans as a great example of that, right? And then lastly, defensively, I would just be curious, because they've had injuries, I feel like, throughout the entirety of Aaron Glenn's tenure as the DC with the Lions, right? Has this just been a stroke of bad injury luck, or is there something that we would expect to see changed or implemented to try to help reduce injuries here with the New York Jets, where we also have a long-standing history of seeing talented guys go down or guys with promise go down, and it's always something significant, right? ACL tears, torn labrums, Achilles, plantar fasciitis type stuff. Is there any real lessons or anything to implement to be learned, or is it just a lot of freak stuff? It doesn't seem like there's a ton of guys being out of position or anything crazy like that that's really occurring, but I would just be interested to know. But let me know what you guys think. What kind of burning questions do you have out there? What are you hoping really gets asked while we do have them for that press conference? I will say, final thoughts here. One of the more annoying things I feel like is when I happen to catch them in real time, I see so many awesome questions in the live stream, and none of those really come up. It feels like a lot of these reporters have these same variations of questions that we hear asked within the first couple minutes, and then nothing really is expanded upon from there. So hopefully we get some great questions. We get some great answers to them. Aaron Glenn seems like a straight shooter. But again, let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you again. Peace.